Hello, and welcome to the Catching the Octopus podcast. Here, we will explore how connecting inward gives us an advantage outward. We openly talk about the obstacles and challenges and difficulties that life throws our way and how they become moments of gratitude and things that can benefit us when we look back on our lives. I'm your host, Niomi Hurley, and it is my mission to bring you top quality guests that will share with you openly their obstacles and also the techniques they use to go inward that strengthens the way that they serve themselves and others at the highest level. Thank you for joining. Let's get started. Welcome to this episode of Catching the Octopus podcast. And in this episode, I'm going to do a recap of the interview that I just had with Sean Picton. Now, the interview with Sean was amazing. He is, in Gibraltar, in the police there. He's got his own business. He's also got a podcast, the Hero Help Desk, and he's doing some great things in the leadership space. The one thing that stood out when he first mentioned was the more he could give as a leader, the better he felt. And I just think that when we give, we get so much in return. It doesn't have to be reciprocated there and then. It's just the energy that's transferred in giving and then receiving really takes us to the next level. And I've been doing some workshops on workplace psychological safety. And one of the things that I've been saying in them recently is I've never met someone that's gone and helped someone else and then turned to me and said, oh, that made me feel really crappy, right? Whenever we can serve and whenever we can help someone else, it actually brings us so much joy. It makes us feel good. And I feel like it's the right thing to do even as just humans, right? We're here for a purpose. We're here to learn. We're here to grow. We're here to make mistakes. We're here to learn from mistakes. But one of the key elements is that oneness, right? It's about that social aspect of being human and helping other people. And the more you can give as a leader, the better you are going to feel, just like Sean was saying. He also said that when he was going through his time of suffering, he realized that his expectations didn't meet reality or didn't match reality. And that's what caused his suffering. And that's very common in our lives, that we have these expectations on where we should be, who we should be, what we should do, how we should show up in the world. And when we're not able to meet those and it doesn't meet our reality, then we have suffering, we have worrying, we have imposter syndrome. And that also goes into relationships. We have expectations about how relationships should present in our lives and expectations on other people and how they should be serving us. And when we have those expectations and they're not met, then that is when the suffering comes upon us. And so if we want to reduce the suffering in our lives, then we need to reduce and get rid of those expectations, right? And sometimes life is just what it is. And I know that some people don't really like that little saying and that quote, but life will present to us the way it's meant to. And when we can have more peace around that, more trust around that, and more acceptance around that, then we don't have as many expectations of what things should look like and how they should be. And that in turn can reduce our suffering. So when Sean realized that his mind and his thoughts and his belief systems could be changed, and he actually made changes to those, he realized that his suffering was reduced. And he said another great nugget, which was, as within, so without. So whatever we're doing in our inner worlds, whatever we're doing with the inside work of our lives, and however we're thinking and feeling, comes out in how we're behaving. And I often talk about how the body and the mind and the emotions are all so tightly connected. One of them's out of kilter and it affects the rest of them. And so that really connected with me to say how we're thinking and the way that we're actually setting up our belief systems and our thoughts and the way we perceive the world and the way we want to show up in the world will come out in that way. Right? Whatever we think about something is how we will then have an attitude of it and how we will approach it. And whether that means that we're going to approach it with curiosity, or we're going to approach it with apprehension, or approach it with excitement, all depends on where our mind sits around that. So that's so as within, so without really resonated with me on a quite a deep level, because that's one of the things that we often miss when we're presenting in the world. And if we're putting on a mask, people will feel that mask. If we're not being authentic, if we're not being, inconsistent in the way we approach things, then that is definitely going to come through. And consistency was another thing that we discussed during our interview, and how when we can come in from a place of continuity of character and continuity of ethics and continuity of values, then that shows up as consistency. And Sean was saying we can't just be, one person at work and one person at home. We have to have that continuity and consistency across both spaces, because if it's not authentic, people will feel that. And as leaders in this world, whether we're leading a team or whether we're just showing up in the world as a leader, not everyone's going to like us. I think if you remember back to an interview with Jeff, he said, if you want to be liked, don't be a leader, sell ice cream. Should always stick in my brain. But, we're always going to be liked, but it's about people respecting us. Leadership is about having that respect from people. And yes, we're going to make decisions that aren't going to be great for others. Yes, we're going to make decisions that will probably upset others. But if they can trust us and trust that we have consistency in how we approach things, we have continuity in our ethics, in our character, in our values, then that will result in them trusting us. And when they trust us, even if they don't like us, they may still respect us. And that's how we have the ability as leaders to influence our teams in the best possible way and to help them grow and to push them through their barriers. Now, talking about barriers, he also said, get comfortable with being uncomfortable. And that was referring around stepping out of your comfort zone. The mind likes what's familiar. It's the brain is actually programmed to look for things that are familiar, because that means safety for the brain. If we go back into our tribal days, if something came in around the tribe that was unfamiliar, we instantly perceived it as a threat. Now, we don't, most of us anyway, don't live in tribal arrangements anymore. We live in suburbia and we are, living in homes, but our brain doesn't recognize the difference, right? Our brain still sees things that are unfamiliar as threats to our safety. It also sees things like change as threats, because change is unknown, and unknown things need to be feared, need to be seen as a threat for our own basic survival. But by just doing one little thing, like Sean said, you don't have to go and jump way out of your comfort zone and take huge risks if that's not how you're wired, but just little inch by inch steps that you're taking outside of your comfort zone will help you then create that familiarity, will help make the uncomfortable start feeling comfortable, make the unfamiliar become familiar to you. And that then creates a better space in our mindset and also our emotional being, which then again, like I said, it's all related, then that affects our behaviors. That encourages us to take those steps even further. I've taken a couple of little inches out of my comfort zone and I haven't been eaten by a saber-toothed tiger. Yay, I'm going to take more, right? So it encourages us to do more and more steps and to go and explore what our potential is. By sitting in our comfort zone, we can sometimes get in our own head, and our own head can be our worst enemy. So by stepping outside, we can have little wins and show ourselves of our capabilities. We can try new things, find new opportunities, expand ourselves in our growth, in our mindset, and in our potential of things that we can do. When I asked him, does he have any advice for new leaders? He was talking about mindset. Having the right mindset. And he spoke about that being comfortable with being uncomfortable. But he's saying the way we think about things sets us up for how we present in the world. And I've mentioned that already, but our mindset, if we have excuses for things not working, then things aren't going to work in our mind. If someone sees a rock in the middle of the desert as a rock, then it's a rock. If someone sees a rock in the middle of the desert as an obstacle on where they want to go, it's an obstacle. If someone sees a rock in the middle of the desert and sees it as a placement from God, source, universe, whatever you believe in, then that's what it will be to them. So our minds are so much more powerful than we actually give them credit for. And having the right mindset was a great tip to give to new leaders that are coming in, to be able to recognize when we're telling ourselves false truths, when we're talking ourselves out of things, and when we're actually got those encouraging thoughts.
If you're enjoying this podcast and you want Niomi or any of her guests featured on your podcast or as a keynote speaker at your next event, you'll find their contact details included in the show notes. If you'd like to learn more about how you can work with Niomi individually or as part of your strategy to improve leadership in your business, then review the courses, offers and services at getupandgroconsulting.com.au.
One of the workshops that I did last month around leadership and around, all of those inner needs that we need to meet to be able to show up as good leaders, I actually asked the room. Everyone in the room, and maybe you can do this as well and have a self-reflect on this, but if there's anyone in the room that's never called themselves a stupid bee, a stupid whatever, put your hand up. And no one in the room could. And so we end up not only having a mindset that can be tainted by our false beliefs, but we're also got this negative self-talk going on, right? Telling ourselves that we're useless or we're stupid or what a silly thing to do, or, all of those sorts of things that are going on make us become our own worst enemy. So having the right mindset, I think, was a really great share for new leaders. I think one of the other interesting things that we spoke about was diversity. Growing teams and having environments that we're in that have diversity. And as leaders, we want to have those diverse team members, right? We want people to come in that think differently and behave differently and feel differently, because they're going to give different perspectives to the objectives that we're trying to achieve, to the goals that we're trying to achieve, and the journey along the way. But some leaders go and hire all of this diversity and then get them in and then expect them to behave in a particular way, right? They expect them to conform to the behaviors they want them to behave in. So it's like, hey, I want diversity, but I don't actually really want diversity. And we're conflicted. And we then spoke about, the generations and how every generation does it. Right. Our generation speaks about the millennials and goes, oh, they're not like our generation. They didn't get out and play with sticks and get on bikes. And, I grew up in the 80s and 90s, so there was less protective gear and that makes me tougher and whatever it is. And then if you look at our parents, they would have been saying the same things. Oh, we didn't have video games when we were younger. The Atari was coming in, right? It wasn't state of the art like we've got today, but that was the sort of change happening there. And then their parents were probably complaining about the music that was coming in on the 60s, right? And the short skirts and all of those changes. So every generation has a different way that we're showing up, because we've got a different environment we're growing up in. And Sean touched on that and spoke about, previous generations have gone through wars and gone through recessions and gone through poverty stages. And the generation of today, with the technology we've got and the advancements we've got, haven't really been exposed to a lot of that. So they've got a different way of approaching the world. So instead of actually trying to make them fit into what we are, and trying to find the differences there because they didn't have the upbringing we did and they didn't do all the same play activities that we did. It's about getting on that level and going, okay, no, they didn't. So how do we meet them where they are? How do we serve them in the best way possible in meeting them in that space? And what can we give them that actually will attract them to come into our workplace. You know, Sean did speak that the days of also about the days of us as a business interviewing someone and then deciding if they're a good fit. It's kind of changed in the power space to an interviewee coming into the business to see if the business is a good fit for them. And so we need to be adapting and changing and being accepting of the changing world around us and how that's influencing our workplace. So it's changing the world of work as well, on how we're remunerating our employees and how we're being more flexible with things in the workplace, and also meeting more of those human needs rather than the survival needs. You know, Sean was saying that it used to be have a mortgage, have security for your family, have an income so that you can, you know, have the basic minimums, have a car, have a house, that sort of thing. But needs have changed. People are now being aware of their own internal needs that need to be met. Maybe it's the need for flexibility or the need for autonomy or that need to have space and time out and quiet time or that need to spend time with their family. You know, these things are now taking a priority. And so as great leaders, it's recognizing that and encouraging the diversity in our teams, but then not making them or not trying to make them fit in to the world that we expect them to, actually meeting them where they are. And that creates the greatness that we can have in our teams. One of the other key things that I heard Sean say in a Leadership 30 that I listened to as part of the Southwest Leaders, and we then briefly spoke about it in the interview, was participate in your own rescue. You know, when you're in that place of whether it's high-level suffering or whether it's just frustration or whether it's things around us are changing, we need to step up and participate in our own rescue. We need to find out how we can show up better. We need to be more adaptable to change. Maybe we need to go within a little bit more and find out, what is it really that makes me tick? What are my core values, my core ethics, and how my character is set up? And how can I use that to show up in the world? What tools and techniques are out there that can help me improve in things? You know, he was speaking about YouTube videos and different motivational spaces. He also spoke about the Wheel of Life. If you haven't seen the Wheel of Life, I suggest you Google it and have a look. It's a really great tool for doing a life analysis and seeing what areas of your life you've got high satisfaction in and what areas you've got low satisfaction in. And then the things with low satisfaction are the things that you can work on to try and create that life of less suffering. Sean also talked about doing a reflective practice and reflecting and thinking about what his goals are for the day and what he wanted to achieve and things that he was grateful for and things that he had achieved. Now, when he spoke about that, he said he's been doing that for a long while, and he recognized that the time that he was in that depressive state and in his depression, the words, the energy, the themes that were coming through were so different to what he's coming up with today when he does this. And so this is a transformative, I'll get that word out in a minute, hang on. This is a transformative process that you can't get right or wrong. It's just about doing something for you that you can show up to. And you don't have to share it with people. It could be something that you just keep for something personal, but it's a really great way to actually start reflecting on, what am I doing well in my world and what am I doing not so well? And you could even use one of the tools that we talked about in my interview with Jeff Stewart a couple of weeks ago, and that is that stop, start, and continue. You know, have some self-reflection and look at what's going on and going, okay, what out of my life should I stop doing? What's unhelpful? What's not getting me forward? What's keeping me in suffering? Then you can look at, what should I start doing? What's going to get me that next step further? What's going to bring me joy? What's going to help align that close connection between the mind and the body and the emotions? And then what is it that I'm doing that's working and I need to continue? What do I need to continue doing? So that's a really great space to go into when you're doing a self-reflection, to see where you are and how you can make improvements to be in a space that is more joyful, less suffering, and also progressing forward. Because if you're not moving forward and you're staying stuck, then that is when you start getting in your own head. That is when you start having those unhelpful spaces, those unhelpful emotions, those unhelpful thoughts. So finally, Sean spoke about making pain your power and the motivators for us to change. So we can either see a light at the end of the tunnel when we're in a space, and that can be our motivator. So it can be motivation to move towards pleasure, right? So we can be motivated to move towards pleasure, or we can be motivated because the space we're in is just no longer serving us. And because it's no longer serving us, it's causing us that frustration, that pain, that suffering. And so we're motivated to move away from the pain. So we're either moving toward pleasure or away from pain. And they're two key elements that can help us make some considerable change in our lives. Now, change can be done in so many different ways. It's just those inch steps coming out of your comfort zone that can create change. Doing a self-reflective practice, that can create change. Maybe it's, as he mentioned, going hiking, swimming in the ocean, connecting with family, spending more time on those things that actually fill your heart. That can make some change. You know, if it's in leadership, maybe it's signing up for a particular program. Maybe it's getting additional mentors. Maybe it's becoming a mentor or a mentee. You know, the Southwest Leaders program in the area I'm in is perfect for that. Yeah, maybe it's joining a networking group. Maybe it's showing up to networking events. Maybe it's getting a coach or even doing things like RTT. You know, there's so many ways that we can actually get ourselves into a place where we're actually taking those steps, where we're making pain our power and stepping into that power and creating that meaningful change for ourselves. And also then using that as that ability to serve others as a leader. You know, the more Sean could give as a leader, the better he felt. The more we can serve others from our highest level, the better we are going to feel. And so I hope that you've got as many gold nuggets as I did out of Sean's interview. If you haven't heard it yet, definitely jump back, right? Have a listen to it. Have a listen to the way that he comes up with these different things that are no-brainers, but things that we sometimes don't think about or things that we sometimes miss in our day-to-day lives as they become busy. You can reach out to Sean through his podcast, The Hero Help Desk. You can reach him on LinkedIn and you can just go and have a chat with him. He's really open. He's a great guy to connect with. And I hope that you'll continue to get gold nuggets from the podcast as we move forward. And I look forward to serving you in our next episode. Thanks for joining in and listening to this episode of Catching the Octopus podcast. It's been great having you here. And if you'd like to go and like and subscribe and maybe even leave a 5-star rating if you think it's worth it, I'd really appreciate it. I look forward to seeing you in our next episode.